And now, before lunch, we have a privacy success story. So to help you feel a little better after the fear that has been put into some of you, there are indeed examples of technology companies that have addressed privacy in a way that has worked for them. And we're going to hear from Danelle Dixon-Thayer, who is the Associate General Counsel at Mozilla. She is a lawyer. She's been a trial lawyer. She has also worked in technology even before Mozilla with Yahoo, and she's going to be sharing the success story of how they do privacy at Mozilla. Danelle?
And the reason why the Firefox browser came into being was because of this notion that there was a perceived need in the marketplace for a browser that allowed the user to have a voice, and also focused on those issues that this panel was discussing, as well as the Attorney General, when she focused on the data hygiene, is what we like to call it. Privacy is the hot word, but we like to talk about data. And so the protection of the data in a way that the user would expect. Contextual notices, focus on it being, it's the responsibility of the user, how they want to share that data and who they want to share it with. And this was a perceived need in the marketplace. The Firefox browser was created and launched first version in 2004. This is an open source project, so of course anybody can take our code and can then use the browser and create their own browser. They wouldn't include the Firefox marks if they do anything to change the code, because we are we're very focused on the security measures that we have in place there, and we don't want to have our brand be associated with something that maybe they've changed a little bit of the code and changed that. But so we're deeply committed to open. That means open source in terms of our code, but open also in terms of open. We like everybody to know everything that we're doing, and so all of our bugs are public, which sometimes as a lawyer we say, gosh, do they really all have to be public? But they do. They put them out there so that everyone can see and work on the patches and figure out how to improve our browser. So the data hygiene issue and the focus on including this this voice of the user has been a really big issue that we've focused on, not just with the browser, but of course with our operating system as well. The basic model that we employ with respect to the browser and now with our operating system is the no surprises model. Very consistent with what the Attorney General espoused, something that has been in our DNA for a long time. The thing that is surprising to me, coming from a company that was closed, was the notion that it's not just the lawyers that think in terms of the no surprises and privacy. At Mozilla, it's everyone who thinks it. Everyone owns a piece of this to be able to be part of our story. We often get engineers that come to us and say, we just can't do it this way. We're not going to let this code ship because we can't have it be this way. And so we'll look at it and we'll say, well, let's talk about this. What's the reason? And they'll say, well, we can't because of the EU practices. We can't do this in the EU. And a lot of times that they're more aggressive. Our engineers are more aggressive, more protective than even the law requires. So we look at it from the perspective to educate our engineers about, okay, here's the legal landscape, here's the compliance landscape. Now let's think about the user. And what would the user think? What is the surprise factor? And maybe even if the legal landscape doesn't require that we do something a certain way, we would still do it because it makes sense from the no surprises perspective. So this is something that we've implemented in the browser very successfully. We just received an award this year that we are the most trusted internet company, our brand. That's important to us from a privacy standpoint. And that's something that we value. And again, it's in all of our DNA. It's like you need to take that shot to get to work at Mozilla so that you actually can do that, and with the project as well. So even broader than Mozilla itself. So this brings us to the story that I wanted to talk about, which is the story of our operating system. A year ago at Mobile World Congress, we announced that we were going to move into we were going to create a mobile operating system based on HTML5 standards. So again, if you think back to what I said about the browser and the notion that there was a perceived need for disruption in the marketplace, it's the similar reason why the operating system is important to us. There's a perceived need that in the marketplace we have these walled gardens, if you will, with respect to the other operating systems. And so developers like you guys can develop for Apple, the iOS system, or you can develop for Android, but you can't easily swap your apps between the two. You have to create you have to create and build on a different standard. And so from our perspective, being able to bring the power of the web to the mobile device, it brings the power of the web from what we would like to say, to billions of people, and allows developers to be able to build in an environment and with standards that they're used to. So that's the notion behind the mobile, the OS, our Firefox OS is what we called it. We started that story a little more than a year ago. And we now have, we're going to launch the phones with partners later this year. And we are launching in emerging markets. So we're focused on first in Latin America and then also in Poland. And I would hope to see our phones hit, the OS and the phones that the OS runs on hit sometime here in maybe 2014. And again, for us, it's as much about moving the web forward as it is about creating this operating system. When we develop with HTML5 standards, a relatively new standards process with respect to that, there are many things that aren't already included in those standards. For example, just the little notion of the battery and the showing how full the battery is, there was no standard for that. And so our CTO tells the story about how they went back and they looked to see, and there were some standards that were brought to the WC3 3C that actually had this standard and the ability to do that. They worked with those and made it so that you could have this battery and show the battery power on it. And so now that is a standard that has been adopted. And so there are many things that we hope with respect to the standards that we're creating that are going to be pushed through the same process so that we can make it so that everybody who already knows how to develop for the web can develop for an operating system like ours. This operating system, like our browser, is open, and it's going to be available to whoever wants to use that and put it on their devices. We also have launch partners that we have Telefonica and DT, our initial launch partners, as well as working with Qualcomm and other third parties to get this phone, to get the operating system on a phone and get it launched. And so it's been a really exciting thing for us to do to develop this ecosystem. And again, the ability for us to use what we already learned from the browser, which is to allow the end user to have a voice, to allow the end user to be able to determine what data is collected, or at least have an understanding of what data is collected, has run through with respect to the operating system as well. So again, this is in our DNA, and our DNA hasn't changed. We've just focused on a different methodology to push our openness out there. So the notion, some people would say, why are you doing this? And we sort of say, well, why not? This makes sense. This is going to allow those of you who are developers who have been partnering with us as an open source project for years, we feel it allows you an opportunity to create even more. And that's what our goal is. In addition to our many other missions that we have, that is a big one that we have. So we took the same ideals and we did this. So what we basically did with respect to this, and I'm going to give you the basics. You guys are going to have a lot more questions about how this operating system runs, but I'm not the one to answer those. But I'll tell you that we took the Linux kernel and we booted that into our Gecko-based runtime engine so that users can run applications that are developed entirely with web standards. And so that's the notion behind it. So for example, for an application in our marketplace, it could look like an icon and look like an application that we're all used to, but essentially it's a link to somebody's mobile site. And it doesn't look like it is a browser. It looks like it's optimized, so it looks like it's just a web page. It's not, but it's not inside the browser. So it makes it's a lot. The goal of this is to make the web not be a second-class citizen, which is essentially what HTML5 is on the other operating systems. So one of the issues, I wanted to talk a little bit about the challenges that we've confronted, and then obviously what we view as our success, which is to get this thing launched and out there to the public, is we've had many challenges in just through this process, and one of them is just creating the standards for this. And so we've had to do, the dialer on our phone is actually just a web page. The camera on the phone is just a web page. And so it's really cool. And if you think about it from the perspective of these really brilliant minds that were able to come together and think this process through, it's definitely made it so that it pushes the web forward at a different level. And so I encourage you guys all to come and look at the Mozilla.org website, and there's links to the various different places where you can read about our OS in more detail. One of the greatest things about this is that we are bringing to these emerging markets who have feature phones, we're bringing smartphones to them, and the cost of this is going to be a very low-end cost. Because if you think about why an iPhone or some other device might be so expensive, it's because you essentially have a computer, a little computer that has to hold a lot of software. Well, from what our phones are, is they're running with there's some software on there, but they're running with the web. And so it's the device itself doesn't have to hold a lot. So it's bringing these smartphones to the people who are used to feature phones. And particularly for us in those emerging markets where they may not have even had access to the web, unless they had to go to internet cafes. And now they actually can have it on their phone, and they have all the bells and whistles that, it might not be as pretty as the iPhone, but we'll definitely have all the bells and whistles that you would expect to have on a smartphone. So the other issue the challenges that we've had to confront is just the data hygiene issue. We speak about it from that perspective because it's privacy as well as just general data. And the reason why this is a bit more complicated when you're dealing with the phone is if you think about a privacy policy and privacy notices, and you think about the way that they look on the web, some of them, even on the web, you have to scroll down to get 5 pages in. That just doesn't work on the phone, and certainly doesn't work for us. Because if you get to our mantra about no surprises, we don't want to have the end user have to scroll down 10 pages on a mobile device, which actually, frankly, could be 25 pages, to really understand what our policies are. So we optimized our privacy policy and our privacy notices for that screen. And so we really tried to make it that you have the things that would be most surprising to a user, those things are there. You can drill down and you can get to the other notices as well, but we wanted the things that are most surprising or might be most concerning to be at the top, at the front. So it's not the traditional privacy policy that you might see on our website, but it's something that's really optimized for this device. We also, there is this tension. We have to have a healthy tension internally because there's this notion that we would like to be able to describe to the end user of the device every time data is collected. But at the same time, if we did that, no other phones are doing that, everybody would be so scared of our phones that it wouldn't make any sense. Because in the mobile space, very few people actually understand how much data has to be sent to get various different tasks done. So what we've done is, again, taken the no surprise model and tried to make it so that we're not going to give you notice of everything right there as you just first load for the device. We're going to give you contextual notices as you're maybe looking and you're using your Maps app. We're then going to give you a notice about what is happening with respect to data. And it's going to be in context so that, frankly, it's more useful to you. And also, it just makes it so that it is, that the no surprise model comes into play. So these are things that we've thought about as we're developing and as we have developed this operating system. And I would like to take credit for it in legal, but frankly, again, this is about our DNA. And this is about all these people that have created this product. And they've really thought about it as they have developed it, really thought about these issues. Our permissions model with respect to applications in our marketplace and applications that are on the phone, it's something that the engineers themselves really decided, what would a user think has permissions and how do they want to grant those permissions? So these are things that we feel very good about because of the way that we've thought this through, but this is just very consistent with the Mozilla model. So again, the notion with the phone is we need to be transparent about what's being collected when it is in a contextual situation. So make sure the user has that, the no surprises model. So another interesting issue that we've had, a challenge that we've had with respect to this device, and it might be something that is a little bit foreign to companies that are more focused on proprietary and whatnot, But from us, like I said, we're open, and sometimes unbearably open about all of the issues that we deal with. And so when we're dealing with partners, this has really been the first time that we've had to really rely on partners to be able to get this pushed through. And we're dealing with partners that have confidential information, and that their code is really who they are. When you're dealing with, for example, game developers, their code, their proprietary code is really all that company has. And so we can't say to them, well, we're just going to make it open, because of course that doesn't make sense for their model. And we are hyper protective and vigilant about protecting IP rights for everybody. We protect them through what we have as our licensing schemes. We think that's a strong protection of IP from the open source standpoint, to make it out there and available to everybody. But we also have trademarks that we think, and our brand, that is very important to us. So we're vigilant in protecting those. So we understand IP, and we get it. But it's getting in. It's been a nice learning for all of us internally to be able to get this confidential information, be very protective of it, to make sure that we're complying with all of our obligations for our partners, and yet still being consistent with our open values. So sometimes for us in legal, this comes to if we are doing a deal with somebody where we actually are adding some code to it, or we're adding some bells and whistles to something, we will actually say, with respect to those things, because we've done some work here, we want that to be open. What we've done, that's open source, but we can respect the proprietary nature of the remainder. With respect to the games, for example, because one of the main things that our partners have said is that we need to actually have games on the phone. Makes sense. Everybody wants that. We had to prove out the notion that HTML5 could actually run games, and games that you guys all want to see on a phone. And so these games are proprietary, and the code is proprietary, but we have to port them in to be able to be readable and usable on HTML5 standards. And so we've worked with a lot of developers to be able to do this. So it's been a really fun learning curve for us, and we've used our open source tools to be able to do this, to be able to get these games ported into HTML5. And we think it's been fun for the developers too, because at some point, hopefully, you're going to be able to develop even games with respect to these standards and not have to convert everything over from different standards and different language. So the marrying of the closed developer system with our open system has been a really nice thing for us to be able to do, but there's been some hiccups along the way, just in terms of getting all of our engineers and saying, not everything can actually go out on our wikis now. We have to really think through the confidential information and how we're going to protect it. But it's been good. And the final area with respect to the phone that I think is particularly interesting for you guys would be the marketplace. So our marketplace, we're going to have a marketplace just like every other phone out there has. And our marketplace, we've tried to really optimize for the developer, as the developer is our the longest partner relationship that we've had. And we really try to focus on the developer as well as the end user when we're thinking about these things. So in addition to transparency and making sure the developer knows how our marketplace works when they want to come and payments and whatnot, we also have, for our marketplace, we're going to have a payments processing system that is part of our marketplace. You can call our payments API, which is HTML5 standard, well, hopefully going to be a standard. And yet you can also decide that you don't want to use our payment system and you want to bring your own. That's perfectly fine with us too. We would then not get any, the Telefonica or DT, for example, our current partners, wouldn't get a revenue share from that, and that would just be your own, you bring your own payments mechanism to it, and that's on you. But you can also use our payments mechanism. And when we've negotiated these payments, the payments situations, we've definitely optimized and tried to make sure that we can get the developer to really get that 70%, so that there are fees. The number and amount of fees that are in marketplaces is overwhelming. The education piece for me to understand the various different payment processor fees, then you have currency fees, then you have withholding taxes. And depending on your jurisdictions, those withholding taxes can be really prohibitive. We're launching, as I said, in Latin America, so we're dealing with jurisdictions where we don't have those tax treaties back and forth, so it makes it more complicated. But we've definitely tried to optimize for the developer with respect to the fees, as well as with respect to just the notion of the transparency, making sure that the developer understands what kinds of fees are going to be associated with the marketplace. The developer understands how the display is going to look to the end user, because in certain jurisdictions, the taxes are going to be on top of the 99-cent fee, for example, that you charge as a developer. So we really wanted to make the developers aware of this. So we have worked incredibly hard with the marketplace to provide not just information about how the marketplace works, but also to provide information for developers about how privacy policies need to be implemented and the importance of that. And so we're partnering with Hastings and some other organizations to really try to get that kind of information out to you guys so that we can help you write your story. And that's the ultimate goal of all of this, is that we are doing this because we're trying to push the web forward, and pushing the web forward is helping everybody to create their own piece of that story. And so the bottom line is we are going to have a kick-ass phone out later this year. I hope you guys all come and check it out. And again, it's not going to be here, but it's going to be available for you guys to see to the extent that you would like to. That's going to be out sometime this summer. And then we hope to partner with all of you to just move the web forward and help you guys write your story. So thank you. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I'm happy to take a few minutes.
So you said there's going to be an SDK
This summer. It's the carrier. It's our relationships with the carriers. I mean, Poland is if you think about the jurisdictions and the privacy-centric focus of these jurisdictions, it's not a bad one to look at. But we're trying to go into emerging markets and emerging jurisdictions so that we can bring the web to these places that normally would just be using feature phones. Anyone else? All right, thank you.